These things are kind of weird, huh?
Mm.
I like it.
It's all right.
Where'd you get it?
There's a shop called Mr. Hookah in Prague, and I stole it.
Did you at least dilate the time?
Yeah, we can get it back before the human consciousness has detected the loss.
So how long has it been? Maybe 30 seconds in Earth time and we're okay?
We're okay for now. We can keep it for another couple of hours, but we really need to get it back.
Okay. Well, luckily these don't affect our flesh vehicles because we're kind of in that variation. You know what I mean?
Mm.
I'm just keeping the flavor in the tongue right at the moment, but it's not going to affect my lungs in any way.
No,
correct?
absolutely not.
Okay.
It's all holographic at this point. It's just light and the appearance of form, but it's not actually doing anything.
Think about the amount of suffering it would cost you if you were consistently in that flesh vehicle and you had to deal with all of the troubles that have it. This kind of messes up the sentences, doesn't it?
It really does. Even though it's only simulated, it will scramble your simulated consciousness as though it were real.
So with that being said, imagine being stuck in your human flesh vehicle 24/7, the anxiety and the suffering that would be there all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Even when you're doing something enjoyable, people would be like, oh, that's really bad for you.
That's really bad for you, and it's dangerous, and it's going to damage your flesh vehicle, and I'm going to get freaked out because I'm scared about my flesh vehicle, and there's a lot of flesh vehicle anxiety going around.
It's already tough enough just to do nothing in a flesh vehicle.
Mm-hmm. The hardest thing, actually. It's interesting. They have this whole discipline called Buddhism down there, and they identified through Buddhism that dukkha, which is suffering, was one of the core components of life. And then the solution to that was doing nothing, but literally. They just sit the flesh vehicle really, really still, focus the consciousness on one thing for extended periods of time, and that actually reduces suffering.
But that doesn't make sense because when I was manifested in my flesh vehicle, all I wanted to do was to consistently stimulate every part of my brain and my blood cells and my, the extra appendage, the feel-good part.
Oh, the feel-good appendage.
Yeah,
I was a sucker for that too. Oh, wait. I mean,
you were...
No,
Oh, you were one of those types?
No, I enjoyed... No, I was...
Speaking of which, would you like to?
Oh, all right.
That's what I thought. So, but then why is it that when all the suffering will disappear if you don't focus, if you focus on absolutely nothing, but everything about the flesh vehicle wants the stimulation? Because that does feel good. You just stimulate everything about being in a body the entire time, and it feels like there's an impulse to always do that. But why is the answer to just sit around and do nothing to get rid of all the suffering?
Because if you're constantly responding to stimulation and impulse, you live in chaos, and chaos breeds more suffering.
Then why are we doing this?
That's a good question.
Perhaps you just balance it. Sometimes you do it, sometimes you don't.
The little get out clause you would have if you were one of these Buddhist types is you would say you do it with conscious awareness and it reduces the suffering. If you do it unconsciously and impulsively, that creates dukkha. Dukkha.
See, this is the problem when it comes to the flesh vehicle.
I got greedy for the pleasure.
Yeah, if you think about it, all the humans want to do is just poison themselves in every single way because they enjoy the feeling of it. Why is that?
Addiction to pleasure. You get stuck on it, it creates suffering. So the only route out of suffering is almost a kind of, I use my words carefully here, but English as a human language is pretty limited. Proto-Indo-European roots as it has. If you kind of withdraw from the stimulation, that was the idea. So they had these people, they called them monks and nuns, and they would literally just abandon civilization, abandon human society, and then just go and do nothing together. They would wear a uniform, they would shave their heads. Everybody that was around them looked the same. Many of them took vows of silence just so there'd be less content, less stimulation, nothing to attach to. And in that space, human consciousness, the pool of human consciousness seems to still, and then suffering is reduced.
But that sounds so boring, man.
It kind of is.
Well, it's like, why would you manifest into the flesh vehicle, enjoy poisoning yourself and rubbing body parts and all that stuff when the actual answer to get rid of suffering is to do nothing? Then there would be no point to manifest in the flesh vehicle. Corona sent us here for like, what, year extension on your end?
I think it's a year extension for me, yeah.
So then enjoy it, man. Flip your brains out.
Maybe she's testing me, though. Maybe the point is that you could do it, but that you choose not to do it. And in not doing it, you override the impulse and then reduce suffering. Because you can reduce suffering for yourself with that stillness thing, with space, with silence. And the idea, the hypothesis is that it reduces suffering for people around you. Human consciousness is a burst of energy. And like an explosion, it explodes outward. And it has that power, that inertia. And if we ride that inertia, or we power that inertia more, it gets stronger and stronger. And it has its own gravity. And I think the test, I'm not sure it's a test, the game is not to do that. Because it's a big temptation to do it.
So are you implying that Corona, our tentacly boss, is testing what it means to be human in a flesh vehicle, and maybe you're assuming that the whole agenda of our mission is to override all of our human impulses? So being a human is basically a long shit test.
Being a human is one long shit test. That might be the smartest thing you've ever said. That's a profound statement right there.
I usually don't speak English, so.
Because the question would be, we're not qualified for this job. She sent people who she knew would probably fuck it up. Because we're dummies.
She picked us out of all people to experience and override suffering as a human being when we are gluttons for those
stimulus.
behaviors.
Exactly. We're decadent libertines who indulge and love that whole thing, that whole lifestyle.
Is that why we're slowly becoming more attached and enjoying what it's like to be in a flesh suit? Because I definitely am. I think it's quite fun, actually. And that's why, in my own scrambled mind, I can't fathom how enjoyable it would be to just sit on top of a rock wearing a tunic, thinking about nothing for 10 hours a day. Then there would be no point in manifesting as the human.
Yeah, that's a good point. So we would be like a worked example of what happens when you shove a non-human consciousness into the human flesh vehicle, because we shouldn't be attaching to it, and yet we do. So it's not a question of human consciousness that's the problem. Maybe it's the context in which human consciousness occurs. The flesh vehicle, the low resource environment. I mean, it's tough down there. Not right now, but through most of our evolution, there was just nothing. There was nothing to eat. There was loads of predators. There was bad weather, storms, rocks, death, pain, and suffering. And so it's going to lead consciousness in that direction. Maybe human consciousness is pH neutral, and it's the environment that's the problem. That would include the flesh vehicle.
Why would something neutral like the human consciousness just transpire into something that's just exclusively reactive to external stimuli if we weren't supposed to be like... It's like music. It's like dance. Dance is like immediate impulsive reaction to external stimuli, but it feels good though, as opposed to feeling bad.
Again, there's that element, and I'm aware that this could be slippery of me, but there's the element of conscious awareness and intent. So humans have a choice. If you do it with conscious awareness and with intent, then you're less reactive. Though you're right, you are still dancing to the music.
Are you gonna enjoy this year-long extension in a flesh suit in the meantime? Because right now, apparently, I manifested as well as you in Prague for a bit of time, and then everybody's catching the little, invisible monster up in their nose, and like the numbers are rising, and apparently you can't really do much. Like, thank God we're out in the flip ship right now. Imagine the people that would yell at us if they found out that we were in our flesh suits inhaling some sort of tube.
But that's the interesting thing, isn't it? Is like the collective message from the authority figures in humanity right now is saying, do nothing. Sit still. Go home. Enjoy less of your stimulations. I mean, that's what they took off the board first. Sports, dancing, music, even religious congregations. They took them away first. All the stim
That's
stuff.
the only thing that keeps people level.
Right.
Why would they take the thing that keeps most flesh suit carriers sane?
There's only two ways I see that as being a thing: a deliberate attempt to torture or a deliberate attempt to enlighten. Thesis antithesis, synthesis. Sometimes the road to enlightenment is a kind of torture. It's suffering.
Huh. Because people only start getting their shit together once they get like a straight up punch to the jaw and they lose like a few teeth.
Yeah.
And they start really tasting the goulash that they're sipping on for real. Because that way they don't take the lack of teeth for granted this time.
That's it.
So maybe we're all just getting punched in the jaw and we're supposed to like it. Some people like that. Did you know that? Humans like go in the bedroom, they like hit each other.
They're attachment machines, man. They can get attached to anything at all, including suffering. Crazy.
They like tie each other up with rope and stuff, and they love it.
That's disgusting. I would never personally engage in that if I was manifested in a flesh vehicle. Did I? Didn't I? I don't know.
Yeah. Well, in the meantime,
You can't prove anything.
Yeah, I know. In the meantime, just put your mouth on this.
Yes, Daddy.
Yo. So okay, if right now I think they're going through like this, what do you saw, the second wave, like surfs up, bro, like let's like ride this out, and it's like a bad wave because then the people that are on like beach cities and islands and stuff, they like the waves and surfing on the waves, except this type of wave is something that we all don't like because apparently everybody's getting like really messed up. But the fact is, like, after this first one, I felt like there was maybe more of suffering, and it really impacted people terribly in another way. They have this thing called economy. It's like with money or something.
Yeah, the cash flow system. They're still using currency down there.
Yeah, apparently they survive by trading pieces of paper back and forth, but then because of this type of like first wave, second wave thing, the pieces of paper can't move as fast as it usually does.
Fiat currency, little pieces of debt.
And apparently when the paper stops moving, everybody is in a worse position. So I feel like even more people are affected by the piece of paper not moving around than the invisible monster.
Yeah, some people have suggested that. So there's suffering that comes from two potential places: the danger of the biological attack to the flesh vehicle, but then the dangers longer term for if the little pieces of paper start flying around, where there'll just be less stuff and people won't be able to look after their flesh vehicles because there'll be less stuff. They'll be living in a poorer environment after that. So there is that balancing of dangers. There's several threats, there's several dangers, and it's not clear exactly how to respond to it. In fact, you could say it's the least clear moment in human history that I'm aware of. I'm kind of a dummy. I didn't study it properly, but it seems like that to me. The lack of clarity. There's no identifiable enemy, but they're evolved for identifiable enemies. They're not evolved for ambiguity.
So what do you think causes more human suffering? If they had a tangible lion chasing them, or if they were just running from something invisible that they thought that was trying to kill them, but they weren't sure if it was actually anything at all? A ghost or an actual tangible lion?
Your second description of an intangible ghost that's chasing you, that may or may not exist, is probably the best definition of suffering that you could give. Referencing those Buddhists again, that's the definition of dukkha. It's the running away from intangible ghosts that may or may not really exist. It's kind of a self-torture. They were like the mental health professionals before mental health existed. They would be saying, you know, where is these illusions coming from? If you're engaged fully and associated in reality with full focus, you suffer less. But if you're in the delusion, running from the invisible ghosts and the invisible threats, I mean, they never get tired. A lion gets tired, or it eats and you die. These things they're eternal. They never run out. They never wear out because they're not real. They're simulated.
So let's call these things the mind ghosts, right? The stuff that people start like grabbing their hair and pulling it out for, stuff that isn't necessarily an actual lion chasing them. Let's call them the mind ghosts, right?
Like
So these ghosts, people are convinced that they're chasing them. And like with a lot of these apparitions and stuff like that, it takes a person's mind to convince them that it is real in the first place, which means that it is real because humans work off projections and subjectivity. So if they imagine something to actually be there, there's a thing called like placebo. There was a human band that adopted that name, but also the effect of like taking like a sugar pill and they think that like their, you know, ovarian cramps disappeared or something like that.
Right.
So if they are convinced that there is a mind ghost following them, they get really, really hurt if you told that person, hey, there's no ghosts.
So placebo has the same root as placer, which means to please or pleasure. Nocebo is what you're talking about, where the thing doesn't actually exist, but it still causes pain and suffering. So how do you convince people who are running from ghosts that there's no real threat? And that's probably a really good definition of what's going on back in the past there in 2020, is there's a lot of running from, what did you call them? Mind ghosts?
Mind ghosts. Was there almost, I think the correct term is a danpemic?
It's demopanic.
Demopanic.
Man-demopanic.
Right. I felt like there was already a pandemic? Pandemic? Like the animal?
I think so.
Eyeballs?
Yeah, they're quite threatening.
So the first pandemic was actually something that had to deal with the mind, right? Because there was some sort of viral mental infection at first,
right,
for a while.
Yeah.
And then this weird physical thing apparently is the end of it.
Yeah. It's interesting that word, like it reminds me of the word panic, which comes from one of their gods over in the western side of the world. How do they divide it into east and west? Anyway, in the western side of the world, which is this spirit god of pure nature, pure lust, pure chaos. It's life, but it's life unbridled. It's life unedited. And it sort of implies that if you imbibe life unedited and unbridled with no structure, no ideology, you shit your pants and you panic and you start running from invisible ghosts. So people who were possessed by Pan lost their minds. They had these warriors, the Spartan warriors, and they played panpipes when they went into battle to try and scare the shit out of their enemy. Before they'd even killed any of them, they would terrify them with this sound.
You said shit your pants?
Yes.
Okay, I have the solution for this particular report. Buy a lot of toilet paper and that should solve the crisis.
They should all buy all the toilet paper all of the time, or what?
Okay, you usually write the reports. I'll write that in this report.
Okay,
and I'll send it over.
Beautiful. I love it.
All right.